Listening Fanfiction presents Surviving is the same thing as winning by Please Dial 123, part of the How to Make a Team series. Read for you by Sierra Feast, based on Naruto. Chapter 1, Passing the Forest of Death. Kakashi met his team at the tower, anxious and trembling just the slightest, even if he hid it by burying his hands in his buckets. They stumbled into the tower barely 2 hours before the end of the second exam, and they looked like utter hell. "Injuries?" Kakashi barked, stress making him harsh.
"Sakura's cheek is broken, as well as around her eye,"
Naruto said, desperate.
"and I think her wrist is sprained, and Sasuke has to have broken ribs. He's also got this bite."
Sakura looked shaky, breathing wet and raspy through the blood crusted around her nose and mouth, eye blackened and face bruised and swelling. Sasuke was breathing shallow and careful, more grace in his movement than usual as he tried not to jostle his sides. Naruto was probably fine due to his healing factor. Their clothes were cut and ripped and dirtied to an extreme degree. Sasuke's kimono top hanging on by scraps, Sakura's missing, and Naruto's Aoi barely orange under the mud and the blood and the gunk. All their armor had held up though, despite the scrapes and mars. Judging by the blade marks on the paint job on Sakura's leg armor, someone had tried to take multiple blades to them, and they'd saved her. Sasuke looked to be in shock, with perhaps the tail end of a fever, shaking slightly. And then there was a flash of red as the Sharingan flickered out of Sasuke's face, something like horror etched in the lines of his face, and Kakashi winced. They'd have to have a talk about that later. Naruto looked a bit better, scraped up and marred, but his healing had saved him the worst of it. He merely looked frazzled, eyes darting between his teammates as he flitted around them like a worried bird. Kakashi looked at his trembling, bleeding, beaten-down team and nearly fell on them with relief. Then Sakura burst into tears, cradling her beaten face, crying harder as it jostled her injuries, the snot clogging her airways. Naruto followed, sniffling before bawling. Even Sasuke took one look at their shared misery, eyes blackening, and started crying. Despite their injuries, Kakashi dragged them into a gentle hug. "It's okay," he whispered. "You did good. You did fantastic. I'm proud of all of you. You're all alive and maybe you're hurt, but we can fix that." They sobbed, clinging to him, even Sasuke joining in, and he simply held them for a long moment. When Sakura started to choke on the blood, snot, tears, and pain, he started to herd them to the medical clinic that had been set up in a spare room. The medic nin on duty all but fell on his students, wiping and disinfecting and bandaging. Kakashi hovered about the edges, waiting until they were finally returned to his arms. They looked a tad better. "Okay, deep breaths," Kakashi said softly. "Now, we are going to go get food, since we don't have time to wash off, and then we have the next stage of the exam to do. Are you good?" They all nodded, looking a tad better now that the blood on their faces and hands had been washed away. So Kakashi dragged them to an empty room and withdrew the meals he had sealed away. He had planned to give them to a victorious team, emerged from the force with little injury. He hadn't been worried because he had trusted they were better than any of the other Genin hopefuls, if simply for the fact their teamwork was nearly flawless. And then reports of Orochimaru had been passed along to Kakashi, and he had panicked. He would have been on the team trying to hunt the man down if he didn't have his team to think of first. "Tell me what happened?" Kakashi urged as his students inhaled the food after 3 days in the forest of death. Naruto started, obviously the one with the most energy, with Sakura and Sasuke only inputting when he forgot a detail. Naruto told him of the first stage, of eyeing teams warily and staying close together despite various teams mingling. They had an easy written exam that they had managed to cheat through using Sakura's genjutsu. She layered a vision of the answers she knew over the paper, which they traced, and that was that. They told him of how they had been so smug at the thought of a forced survival exam, knowing that despite the ramped-up danger, they could do it. Kakashi learned of how smooth it had been going, of how they had got their scroll the second day in, early in the morning, and set off towards the tower. Then they told him of being ambushed by the disguised Orochimaru, of a snake summon eating Naruto, told him of how Sakura and Sasuke had attacked the man, enraged and gotten beat down savagely. Naruto had rejoined them and they had attempted a retreat, but Orochimaru was a Sannin for a reason. He had chased them down for half a day, running them into the ground and harrying them. And then he'd done something to Naruto's seal, knocking him out of the fight and out of consciousness. Sakura wearily took up the tale, saying how they had thought the blonde dead and Sasuke's Sharingan had come blooming to life. She told him how Orochimaru had then dismissed her and focused on Sasuke. They had fought desperately, but the man had been too strong. This was when he laid the seal on Sasuke's neck. Sakura said she had tried to stop it and had managed to land a devastating hammer hit to Orochimaru's neck, but the man had simply brushed it off as every other injury he had. She had thought them both dead and attacked Orochimaru in a blind rage. She claimed to have gotten in one more hammer blow before he tossed her out of a tree and vanished, leaving her to land funny and break her wrist. She had escaped with the least injuries, but had taken a while to gather herself, as she had thought both teammates dead, until she checked their pulses. Sakura mumbled something about being so glad they were alive. She had simply stayed there for a bit, alone and exhausted, but at least alive. She told Kakashi how she had retreated to a more defendable location and hunkered down, using most of Naruto's supplies and former teachings to lay the most deadly traps she could. The boys had had the night to rest, but Sakura drove herself further into exhaustion by keeping watch and making sure her teammates kept breathing, despite Naruto's stillness and Sasuke's high fever. And then they had been attacked by an Otonin team. Sakura calmly told him, sounding almost detached from the story, of how they must have been high chunin smuggled in under the guise of genin. The traps had worked at keeping them at bay for a while, and managed to severely injure the kunoichi's leg. But they had not worked to fully protect the three, and Sakura had been drawn into battle. Sakura had tried her best, obviously, but 2-on-1 when Sakura was injured, exhausted, and held back by having to keep on the defense led to a losing battle for her. In the end, she had managed to knock one of the other Otonin back, crushing his shoulder in a devastating punch with her knuckle dusters. The last one had decided to make her death slow when she had held onto him with the last of her strength to stop him from murdering his target, Sasuke. He had apparently started beating her viciously. He had explained the cracked cheekbone, the fractured eye socket, and the light concussion she had had on top of the bruises. That was when Sasuke had awoke, the seal coming to life on his skin. The boy beating Sakura had not survived a minute more, and Sakura said that all that was left of him now was pieces strewn about. Naruto, having woken quickly into this rage, had apparently been in no better a mood seeing Sakura wheezing for breath through her own blood, and had viciously destroyed the other two who had stepped in despite injury to try and save their teammate. All three looked sickly proud of themselves, eyes wide with glee and horror, and Kakashi made sure to give them a proud smile and ruffle their hair. While revenge was not something they liked to cultivate in their shinobi, vengeance for a teammate was understandable. "You did well," Kakashi said once more heartfelt. "You're all alive, and you walked away from a Sannin and the assassination team he sent after you. I'm very proud." They beamed, despite the mud and blood and injuries, cheeks stuffed with food, as they finished their meals. "The next round is a set of battles," Kakashi explained, despite the fact he really wasn't supposed to. "Are you ready?" "Bring it!" Naruto roared. "Even with your wonky chakra?" Kakashi asked. Naruto merely popped a fist into the air and shoved his last mouthful of food in. "Despite knowing you can't use chakra without that poisonous seal acting up?" Kakashi asked Sasuke. Sasuke's fists clenched, and he gave a sharp nod. "Despite the fact, if they hit you in the face, you're going to go down hard?" Kakashi asked Sakura. She nodded decisively. He beamed at the team and waved them out the door. He caught Sakura's arm as she went last, and she looked up at him. He pressed a small pill into her hand. "A soldier pill," he murmured. "There are no rules against them, but they really aren't good for you, especially not for going genin. But you've been hit the hardest. Take it before your match." He gave her a serious look, and she nodded, just as solemn, taking the pill. It was a cheat, of course, and no genin should be using them in the exam. But genin weren't also supposed to face Sannin and assassination teams mid-exam! Kakashi led the group of them down to the arena to face the elimination rounds. And if Kakashi had to regulate his breathing, had to unclench sweaty hands and calm a shake, well, no one saw it beside his students, and they said nothing. They had survived. He kept telling himself that, even as he tried not to see Sasuke's tremble, or hear Sakura's wheezy breathing, or feel the sheer concern Naruto radiated when he looked at the other two, they had survived, and that was all that mattered. Now they were going to claw their way to a win, and Kakashi would be at their back every step of the way.